The Edmonton Oilers pulled off one of their gutsiest wins of the entire season tonight against the St. Louis Blues. If you're an Oilers fan, you feel good about that one.
You are Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Victory Thursday edition of Locked On Oilers. I am your host, Nick Zararis. I want to thank everyone that's making Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day. Locked On Oilers, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are almost at one full year as me as the host of Locked On Oilers, and it's been quite the journey, and I'm very glad I'm still here. Today's Victory Thursday edition of the show is very straightforward. We're going to unpack why that was such a satisfying victory. We're going to talk about how I watched the final 7 minutes of that game standing with my arms crossed and pacing back and forth, desperately hoping and pleading they would find a way. And sure enough, there was Connor Brown, who had a pair tonight. And there's a whole lot to get to. We're going to start with the very straightforward. The vibes of this game, this kind of felt like a playoff game. There wasn't a lot of room out there. We'll dive into that. We're going to talk as far as the resolve the Oilers showed in this game. That'll be the second segment. And then for our final segment, we're going to tie a bow on this episode, just giving Connor McDavid his flowers for another really virtuoso performance, even though he didn't end up recording a goal, 3 assists in his return to the lineup after missing 7 straight. So to set the tone, you are coming into a game against a team that had won 11 of its 12 previous games. And the one loss the Blues had in their last 12 games coming into tonight was the other day against the Jets. And the Jets have been one of, if not the best team in the entire NHL for the majority of the regular season. The Blues are a stingy defensive team. Their superstar players, guys like Robert Thomas and Jordan Kyrou and Pavel Buchnevich, have been on fire. Robert Thomas has the most points of any player. It had the most points of any player in the month of March in the entire NHL. He's consistently been a point per game player for the last month. Him, Buchnevich, and Kyrou contributed all 7 points on the 3 St. Louis Blues goals tonight. They are a really frustrating team to play against. And the first 10 minutes or so of this game in regulation, it was a real slog. The Oilers couldn't really get out of their own ends. The Blues were very content to keep turning the Oilers over in the neutral zone, sending the puck all the way back down behind Calvin Pickard, making the Oilers regroup and making them try and break out again. And we talk about this all the time as far as how you mitigate against a team you feel is a little bit better than you or might be more talented than you. You try and slow the game down and make them work the length of the ice. It's really a frustrating way to play hockey, especially if you're a creative or a dangerous player. And the Blues are a good enough team that their high-end players have the luxury of dictating how they would like to play. But it's really the sign of a well-coached team when bottom sixers and third pair defensemen, when they're not trying to do too much and they're just keeping their game simple and actively making their opponents uncomfortable, that's a good place to be. And I give the Blues a lot of credit because they had the Oilers working really hard in this game. And we've discussed all season long, and the everydayers have heard me say this a lot, especially over the last week. I think that Ducks game was a perfect encapsulation of the limitations of being a cycle offense. And I know that sounds a little disingenuous for me to say, considering how much I ring the bell of the Florida Panthers. The difference is the Florida Panthers are built to be a cycle team. You look at guys like Sam Bennett, like Matthew Tkachuk, Evan Rodriguez, Sasha Barkov. They are littered with forwards who like to forecheck, who aren't afraid to use their body, who are great at leveraging their body to win puck battles. Whereas the Oilers, they have a few guys who are good at that. I would consider Podkolzin their best forechecker, cycle forward in that respect. I think Zach Hyman on occasion is a pretty good forechecker. You're hoping that when Trent Frederick and Evander Kane return to this lineup, whenever that is, both of those guys can add to that mix and maybe deepen what's been a weak point for your team. And you've had to make that transition by necessity. And we talked about that with Haley Simon of Locked On Blues yesterday, the idea that you lost McLeod Fogle, and Holloway, arguably your three fastest non-McDavid skaters, and you really had to adjust how you want to play. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the Oilers, when they have found ways to win this year, especially over the last month or so when the wins have been really hard to come by, it's largely been in games where they've gotten help from that depth. And tonight, you got a pair from Connor Brown and you got one from Arvidsson. Those are the types of guys you are going to need to step up at various points the further you go. And it can't always be Connor. It can't always be Leon. It can't always be Evan Bouchard. And I give a lot of credit, and we will talk more about McDavid in our third segment, but I give a lot of credit to McDavid for suiting up tonight. You know, he's not at 100% yet, and he was itching to get back in there. He knew the team needed him in this game, and to his credit, he was the most impactful player in this game for the Oilers. And when you're in these tight games, you are in these margin games where it's one bounce, one play. It doesn't take a whole lot to swing it. I mean, when when Bouchard drew that power play with a little over 2 minutes to go, driving the net, and it was weak. He went down a little easy. I did see a few people on Twitter say they thought it was a dive, which did make me laugh, but I did see that. And then McDavid gets called for the interference on Robert Thomas on the breakout, where Thomas sticks his arm out to try and get in front of McDavid and kind of goad him into grabbing onto him, which McDavid did. And Connor knows better than that. But with the way the game had been officiated, and I really hate the way the Oilers have been officiated in their last two games against the Ducks and tonight. I thought the officials did a pretty bang-up job as far as keeping the game under control and what we're calling versus what we're letting go. As we always say, I just want consistency. What's a penalty in the first 5 minutes should be a penalty in the last 5 minutes. And that was the moment I was worried, because the first two periods of this game felt like a playoff game. There wasn't a lot of room. Both teams single-digit shots on goal in each of the first two periods. You're looking, I think it was 13-11 shots on goal, if I'm not mistaken, after the first two periods. I wrote it down. 16-12 after two periods. Teams were reluctant to take chances, and I wrote it down in my notes as the game was going along. It kind of felt like a soccer match in that respect, that both teams were kind of reluctant to make that run, because generally in soccer, you're going to set up a slow building, methodical pace towards the attacking part of the field, and then you're going to send a guy on a run and you're going to try and catch him in stride so he can kind of catch the defense off balance. And that's what you saw for a good chunk of this game. There wasn't a lot of room in that middle part of the ice until you got to the backstretch of this game, where both teams really started to try and push for that victory. And ultimately, the Blues had their chances. I would not say the Oilers played an amazing game. I think, if anything, I would say the Oilers played a resilient, a tough game, and they outlasted the Blues. And when the chips were down in a difficult situation, the Oilers had Connor McDavid on the ice with 20 seconds left in the game, and he pulled 4 of the 5 Blues players on the ice towards him, and it left Connor Brown wide open all by himself. It's one of those complicated, and really, it's one of those unfortunate situations where occasionally you do just get to sum the other guy. And look, I'm not here to express empathy for the Blues. I didn't want the Blues to win, obviously. I'm very glad the Oilers won. I was pacing around my room like a lunatic with my arms crossed, standing instead of sitting in a chair for a reason. But sometimes you gotta shake your head and laugh. What are you supposed to do? The best player in the world has the puck on his stick 5 feet from the net. Of course, you're going to have 3 defenders shade towards him. Another forward on the ice is going to shade towards him. And Connor Brown was left wide open in front of the net, and he ripped that shot home. And speaking of Connor Brown, speaking of the Oilers' resiliency, we are going to take our first break of today's show. And when we come back, we're going to talk about just how impressive this win was in terms of resilience, playing down a man, the difficulty of just making it your way through a game like this, and a whole lot more on today's edition of Locked On Oilers. So be sure to stick around.
Did you know getting a good night's sleep is the #1 recipe for long-term success in life? I didn't. It took me way longer to realize than I'd like to admit. It was years of tossing and turning. I was always tired. I never felt like I could live up to my potential. but not anymore, thanks to Bear Mattress. I used their sleep quiz, and I matched with the Elite Hybrid. It's perfect for side sleepers like me. Now I wake up energized. I'm getting deeper sleeps, and I'm ready to attack the day. No matter how you sleep, Bear Mattress has a match for you with a focus on recovery, cooling, and pressure relief to upgrade your sleep and improve your overall quality of life. Go to bearmattress.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL at checkout for 40% off site-wide. This offer is not available anywhere else. You have to use my promo code on the very last page of checkout to get this discount. That's bearmattress.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL for 40% off site-wide. Bearmattress.com, promo code LOCKEDONNHL.
And thank you to everyone who is hanging out on this Victory Thursday edition of Locked On Oilers as we are unpacking a real white knuckler against the St. Louis Blues. And I give the Blues so much credit for the season they've had. It would have been really easy for this group with the expectations they had coming into the season to just phone it in, to go full country club. We see teams across the league when it's not their year, they start to pack it in end of January. And this group, they got the shot in the arm of hiring Jim Montgomery in season. Jim Montgomery, who is a proven quality hockey coach, both at the NCAA and the NHL level. And not to get too caught up on this tangent here, I cannot believe Don Sweeney fired Jim Montgomery as if it was his fault the Bruins were bad this year. Look at that roster pre-trade deadline and tell me what you wanted from that coach that he wasn't able to do. Look where the Bruins are now in the standings since you let go of Jim Montgomery. And to Montgomery's credit, his teams have always played really strong defense, especially those Bruins teams. There's a reason they have the most points ever in the regular season format we exist in now. 2 years ago when they won the President's Trophy, the year Ullmark won the Vezina, that team played lockdown 200-foot defense. They absolutely eliminated that middle part of the ice. And the Blues, to their credit, did a really good job of forcing the Oilers to the outside and trying to do basically what the Ducks did to them, where you can take the shots you want, or we're just going to get in the shooting lane and sure, it's a scoring chance, but it's not a shot on goal. And that's kind of what happened. It took a while to get going. And when you are in a game like this, where it feels like it is entirely up in the air, it is a coin flip game. For so much of the last month, it feels like the Oilers have found ways to lose this game, that they give up 1 and then 2 and then 3, and then you're down 3 goals. And sure, you'll get back in the game. Connor will do something. Leon will do something. Bush will do something. And it's not enough to win, but the expected goals end up looking okay. And it's really a difficult path to walk. And it's something I've contemplated a lot because I don't really have a definitive answer for you as far as where the Oilers can find improvement until they get healthy. And tonight, you dealt with the fact Jake Wallman, late scratch. You only played with 5 defensemen. Your backup, Calvin Pickard, is starting his 7th of his last 8 starts, 7th of the last 8 games. He probably hasn't had that many consecutive starts or that many starts in a block of games in 7 or 8 years, if we're going to be frank. And that's a lot to ask of him physically. You still have no Leon. You still have no Matthias Ekholm. And you lost Wallman as a late scratch. And you had one of the most aggressive minute splits you have had in any game all year. Brett Kulak led all Oiler defensemen in time on ice tonight with 29:04. That's the most he's ever played in an NHL game in his life. And Brett Kulak's like 10 years into being an NHLer, and that's the most minutes he's ever played. Of course, Brett Kulak has traditionally been a 5th or 6th defenseman on most of the teams he's played on this year. He's moonlighted in the top 4. He's occasionally played on the first pair with Evan Bouchard at points this year because the defense has been a work in progress. They've auditioned various guys. We all, of course, remember Travis Dermott. There was the Josh Brown experience. Troy Stetcher is someone who has managed to stick around. John Klingberg may or may not come back from dealing with whatever's got him on long-term injured reserve right now. And everybody had to play more minutes than they typically play tonight on that back end. I mean, they only had 5 defensemen. Kulak got 29:04. Bouchard played the most minutes of any game this year that didn't go to overtime. Nurse played 28:06, the most he's played in a game this season. And then Stetcher and Emberson were both over 17 minutes when those guys are usually closer to 15 or 16 minutes. And sometimes it is even less than that. I mean, on an average night, I want to check just to be sure. On an average night, Troy Stetcher plays 13:46. Tonight, Troy Stetcher played 17:11. On a normal night, Ty Emberson plays 14:51, so about 15 minutes. Tonight he played 17 minutes. So everybody had to play a few more minutes than they were used to playing, in some cases a lot more minutes. And I don't feel like the defense was really an issue tonight. The Blues had a couple of good looks, but you're going to get a few good looks every game. That's just the nature of hockey. It's impossible to play perfect defense all the time. I'll give Darnell Nurse a lot of credit in the sequence leading up to the Connor Brown game-winning goal. He's the one who managed to get his stick in the way on that breakaway, stop the breakaway, didn't take a penalty, and in doing that, he allowed the Oilers to regroup and get one more rush. And I know a lot of people, and me included, at that point, I was ready to take my loser point, eat it all up, go to overtime, and then roll the dice with McDavid, Bouchard, and Hyman and see what happens. And luckily, the Oilers had McDavid out there. They were able to organize a regroup in the neutral zone. Brown has the puck at about center ice. He gets the puck to McDavid at the half wall. McDavid skates down the right wall. He drives towards the back of the net. He pulls two defenders behind him. One defender is going to the opposite post to cut him off, so he's going to get sandwiched between those three guys. And then Oscar Sundqvist is also out there, is drifting towards that post. With four St. Louis Blues drifting in his general direction or him actively pulling those guys towards him, that leaves Connor Brown able to slip in backdoor, and McDavid just puts the pass in a perfect spot. And we're going to get to McDavid's game in a minute and just how essential he is for the game. But you think about everything tonight in terms of resilience and grit. Guys like Arvidsson and Connor Brown who haven't had the best of years. McDavid playing at less than 100%. Pickard playing his seventh out of the last 8 Oiler games. Just when you are and the fact they played 5 defensemen, that is so much working against you circumstantially, and you still manage to win the game, and against a decent team too. And that's really what I think my lasting takeaway from this game is. I don't think the Blues are anything special. I don't think they're better than Winnipeg or Colorado or Dallas or Edmonton or Vegas. But that's an annoying team. They play really good defense. Their best players really are difficult to play against. Robert Thomas was a menace out there tonight, and you still found a way to win in spite of everything that was working against you. And the everydayers know good teams find a way to win, even when they don't play their best and even when the opponent's good. Tonight, the Oilers beat a pretty good team, and they did it in less than ideal circumstances. And I've been looking for signs of life, and that was a sign of life tonight. We're going to take one more break on today's show. When we come back, we are going to dive into Connor McDavid's return to the lineup and why he's so special right after this. Are you looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily nutritional value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help you keep feeling fuller longer. Personally, big fan of the no shell variety. It's the perfect grab and go snack for my busy days. Whether I'm here at my desk working on the show, doing research, or I'm just trying to get in a quick protein fix to hit my macros for the day, they're a great go-to. Or if you're old school and you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the in-shell options are a classic favorite. Wonderful Pistachios is a complete protein that provides all 9 essential amino acids. So, get cracking and get snacking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. thank you to everyone who is hanging out on this Victory Thursday edition of Locked On Oilers. And that's a game you actively walk away feeling good about. Do you think you dominated? Did you deserve to win? Right now, you are in triage. You needed a win in the absolute worst way possible. You were playing a team that is in really good form. And that's why Connor McDavid came back into this lineup sooner than expected. By all accounts, McDavid was maybe going to be able to come back by the weekend, and he pushed that up a couple days. And he did that the last time he was coming back from injury as well. He was expected to miss like 3 to 4 weeks. He ended up missing like 10 days. And you worry about the long-term ramifications of that. And we had an in-depth discussion about this on the show the other day, and I do think it's always worth talking about that risk-reward relationship and what the responsibility of the team is to the team, to the player, and trying to walk that line. Because, of course, if you're Chris Knobloch, if you're that medical staff, and Connor tells you, I feel good enough to play, I want to play, it's really difficult to tell the best hockey player in the world, well, we don't want you to play because even if you think you can play, you might not be ready to play. You might re-aggravate whatever's discomforting you. You might make yourself physically compromised and bother something else. And you have to calculate those trade-offs. And the Oilers got the result they wanted to. So you can say that was a good decision. You could say they got lucky. And ultimately, there's no way of knowing until we get to a month, 2 months, or God willing, 3 months from now. And we're having a conversation in mid-June about McDavid's health and how he's holding up. Because if the Oilers go all the way, it doesn't really matter. And I think McDavid would tell you that himself. He would say, I don't care how bad I'm hurting. I want to win. And to the great players, that type of dogged determination is part of what makes them so commendable. I talk about this all the time. It's one of my favorite things about professional sports, that sports are the purest form of the human condition. All of the elements of humanity are present, and you discover who people are when adversity hits. In sports in particular, in life, but in sports, you learn a lot about how good a player actually is when the circumstances are less than ideal, when they're not feeling well, when they're not great. I always think of, there's this clip of Tom Brady talking about it in front of a panel. I forget it how old it is. It's definitely a couple years old now, but his mindset, and I like to think about this when I'm talking about just working out or going for a run, but it's the days you don't feel good that you got to go out and do it just to prove to yourself you can do it. And you don't have to do it as well as you usually do. If you don't feel well, you're not going to be able to lift as much weight or run as far or run as fast. But to get out there and do it, as long as you're just sore or not feeling great as opposed to hurt, if you can go out there and you can push your way through that discomfort just enough to get it done, that says something about you. That says something about you as about your character and about you as a person. And I have no hesitation in saying that's the type of guy Connor is. And 80% of Connor McDavid is still one of the 10 best hockey players in the world. I don't think that's hyperbole in the slightest bit. I think he played a great game. I think once I saw him make that spin move in the first period to try and facilitate that scoring chance early, I knew he had his feet under him, and it was simply a matter of how good he felt. And real quick, I've explained this a bunch of times on the show over the course of the season, over the course of the last 11 months and 3 weeks of hosting the show. But what makes McDavid so dangerous is his ability to create offense out of nothing. And you think about how long an ice rink is at the NHL level. We're talking about 200 feet long, 80-something feet wide. When you're talking about going that length of the ice, and we talked about it in the first segment, what do good teams do? They make you go that full length of the ice every time. Because if you have to do the work of going from defense to the neutral zone to the offensive zone, that's work. That's effort. That is tiring you out. That's why when teams are protecting leads, they cross center ice, dump the puck in, and you got to burn 30 seconds every single time you do that. But when you have Connor out there, he is either going to be waiting at the half wall in the defensive zone to hit him with that pass, and he's going to go, or the Oilers will do an organized regroup where McDavid will loop back around from the neutral zone. He'll get ahead of steam. He'll get a drop pass, and he will go as fast as he possibly can with the short, choppy steps and bob and weave his way through traffic and pull defenders towards him. And that's what you saw tonight. The speed was there. The burst was there. Now, I think the Oilers have some questions as far as who they're going to play with him come the playoffs. And we've discussed this a ton over the last 2 or 3 weeks. Do you want Nuge on the left? Do you want Evander Kane on the left? Do you want Trent Frederick on the left? Do you want Jeff Skinner on the left? And all of them have varying points for making the argument for them. I don't think there's a right answer. I think there's a wrong answer. And it's going to sound crazy to say considering the results they have historically, but I think you want Nuge as the third line center. I really do think you want to go McDavid, Draisaitl, Nugent-Hopkins, Adam Henrique down the middle, and you go from there as far as building out the lineup and picking what wingers you want and what spot to put them in. Because I think having that type of depth down the middle, having Henrique, who's really good on face-offs in that fourth line spot where you can kind of play matchup with him, you can sneak him back out there if you need a second center on the ice, if it's a particularly important face-off, or it's the side of the ice he's stronger on. And again, there's no right answer as far as lineup permutations because a lot of this is hypothetical because 2 of the guys they're probably going to play in their top 9 in Trent Frederick and Evander Kane have played 7-ish minutes the entire season combined. So the Oilers have a lot of work to do in that respect. They need to figure out who's going to play with who. But seeing McDavid back in the lineup, playing well, making plays for his teammates, a 3-point night, and a return to the lineup where you know he's not at 100% yet, that's why he's the best hockey player in the world. And that's a guy you go into battle with every time and you feel good about it. And I hate making that argument when it comes to the playoffs because this is hockey and not basketball. In basketball, if you've got LeBron, you've got Luka, you've got Anthony Edwards, you got Jason Tatum, you got one guy, you got Jalen Brunson, you got that one guy, you got Jokic, you got that one guy, you can make some noise. And as much as you want Connor and Leon to be able to do that, they need help. And tonight, good night for the Oilers' help. The defense, down to Jake Wallman, who's been very good since coming over from San Jose. Backup goalie, 5 defensemen, no Trent Frederick, no Evander Kane, no Leon Draisaitl, no Matthias Ekholm, and you beat a team that's going to make the playoffs. That's a good win. That will do it for today's edition of Locked On Oilers. If you could be so kind, please subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts or over on YouTube. Thank you so much for making Locked On Oilers your first listen of the day. For your second listen, go check out Locked On NHL, covering the biggest stories around the league with the local expertise of Locked On. Check it out wherever you get your podcasts.